Social Security reform, once again, the primary topic of a debate amongst Republican presidential candidates. In Tampa last night, the candidates discussed ways to reform the entitlement system.
The United States government made a promise to senior citizens, and we have to keep that promise to them. But we also need to know that for those who are not yet on the system simply has to be reformed in order for it to work.
But the idea that we have not had the courage to stand up and look Americans in the face, young mid-career professionals, or kids that are my children's age, and looked them in the eye and said, listen, this is a broken system. It has been called a Ponzi scheme by many people long before me.
But the real issue is that in writing his book, Governor Perry pointed out that in his view, that Social Security is unconstitutional, that this is not something the federal government ought to be involved in, that instead it should be given back to the states. And I think that view, and the view that somehow Social Security has been forced on us over the past 70 years, that by any measure, again, quoting from his book, by any measure, Social Security has been a failure. This is after 70 years of tens of millions of people relying on Social Security. That's a very different matter.
We spent all the money, and it's on its last legs unless we do something. One bill that I had in Congress that never got passed was to prevent the Congress from spending any of that money on the wars and all the nonsense that we do around the world. What I would like to do is to allow all the young people to get out of Social Security and go on their own.
Start with optional personal retirement accounts. In 1981, the Galveston County employees, they opted out because that was a very short window of opportunity. They took it. Today, when people retire in Galveston County, Texas, they retire making at least 50% more than they would ever get out of Social Security.
And this party isn't going to win in 2012 unless we get our act together and fix the problem. We all know that we've got entitlement problems, we've got Medicare, we've got Social Security. The fixes are there. I mean, the Ryan Plan is there, for heaven's sake. We've got the answers. We don't have leadership. That's the problem.
But if you're younger and you'd like a personal account you would control instead of the politicians, and you know you'll have more money at the end of your lifetime if you control it than the politicians, why shouldn't you have the right to choose?
And I went out and talked about Social Security reform. Why? Because I knew this day was coming. And I had the courage to go out and say Social Security is in trouble. And I told a group of young people at LaSalle University that we needed to do something like raising the retirement age. They ran that on TV for 3 weeks prior to the election in the second oldest per capita state in the country. And I still won the election. Why? Because the people of Pennsylvania wanted someone who had the courage to tell them the truth.
For more this morning, we're joined from Washington by Politico senior editor David Mark. David, good morning to you.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
A big chunk of time in last night's debate was all about Social Security. How did this become such a big campaign issue?
It really stems from that first debate when Governor Rick Perry of Texas had rather inconsistent answers, those responses that he didn't really seem ready for. Governor Perry has been a big critic of the Social Security program. In the debate last night, he tried to moderate some of his answers, saying that people who've already paid into it should, of course, get it. He didn't say he had any philosophical problem with it, but that differs from what's in his book. Fed Up, as Mitt Romney noted. I think he's going to hear a lot more of that on the campaign trail.
But this isn't just Mitt Romney and Rick Perry. None of the candidates changed the subject to that first question when they were asked about Social Security, shifting the focus to jobs. Why?
Clearly, the fact that they were in Florida had something to do with it, one of the largest senior populations out there. I think they all want to go on record in one way or another saying precisely where they stand, or at least where they want voters to think they stand. This is a volatile issue for Republicans. Democrats have a long history of successfully using this against GOP candidates, particularly in Florida, and I think they simply wanted to get out ahead of the issue before they were defined by it.
Last night's debate, sponsored by the Tea Party Express, was there a certain tone or was there content specifically tailored to this debate?
I think the debate focused, as we might expect, around economics, the issues of small government as Tea Party supporters would see it. Interestingly, the foreign policy question seemed to skew more toward the Tea Party. Ron Paul, the congressman from Texas, got a lot of applause when he talked about bringing troops home, drawing down troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not the kind of applause that Republican candidates normally get at Republican debates elsewhere.
Let's switch gears here and go back to Monday. Two of the candidates picked up endorsements from leading Republicans. Mitt Romney, endorsed by his rival and former candidate Tim Pawlenty. Rick Perry got the thumbs up from Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. How big of a deal are those endorsements?
I think they help at the margins. I'm usually pretty skeptical that political endorsements by other politicians really make that much difference. In the case of Pawlenty, he didn't do very well in the early primaries and didn't even get to the voting, but he actually did have some level of following. He had some donors, so he might be able to swing that over to Romney. Jindal's an interesting case in Louisiana because he hasn't really been heard much from recently on the national stage. He's kind of fallen off a bit. He had a couple of rough public performances, but he's somebody who has a really strong following among conservative Republicans, and he just might be able to swing some of them over toward Governor Perry from his neighboring state.
Are we looking at possible running mates here?
I think in both cases, these are folks that are going to get due consideration. They're going to be given a hard look for either candidate. We could think of Rick Perry perhaps looking at Tim Pawlenty, or vice versa, Mitt Romney looking at Bobby Jindal, depending on the situation. So I think both of these candidates, these governors, were smart to maybe back one candidate, but still make themselves available a few months from now.
Let's go back to jobs and talk about that. President Obama sent his jobs bill to Congress on Monday. Any rumblings right now on Capitol Hill from Republicans? What are they saying?
Republicans actually were rather mute after his speech to them, to Congress, a few nights ago. They didn't want to look like they were just being obstructionist, only saying no to the opposition presidency. So far, they've been a little bit quiet on it. When the bill was first introduced, they said, oh, we're going to take a look at it. We might agree with the president on some measures, not so much on others. The problem congressional Republicans face is a lot of their Tea Party supporters and others do not want any accommodation with the president, and they're really kind of pulled in both directions. They're trying to look statesmanlike, trying to make it seem like they could work with the president, yet not hand him any political victories. It's a tough needle to thread.
All right, Politico's David Marek joining us from Washington this morning. Thank you so much, as always, David.
Thank you.